Paul, hey,
Welcome back.
Great feedback yesterday.
Yep.
We're glad to have you back with us again. And you ready? You ready to roll?
I'm ready to roll. I'm just pleased I didn't chase everybody away.
No,
Hey, everybody's still here, and honestly, this day from an audience standpoint is always even much bigger than the leadership management. So we got a big crowd out there for you. So we'll talk when you're done. So take it away, my friend.
Excellent. Hey, thank you all very much. For those of you who were here yesterday and came back, that's great. This presentation is going to have some similarities in terms of philosophy, but numerous differences because we're talking sales. So I'm going to try to frame things a little bit differently. Before I dive in, I have to tell you, I've been selling a long time. I've been involved in radio my entire career, and I've seen ups and downs. And you know what? I live in Detroit. And when you live in Detroit, you know what a recession is because, if they hit the country, they really hit here. I understand what's happening out there. We're in a fascinating time right now. We have a great economy. I mean, GDP came out today, it was up again. But we have an advertising recession. Now, it's less so in small markets. Small markets are hanging in pretty good. But in general, the ad market is changing. Ratings don't matter as much as they used to. There's a lot of compression. The clients are beating radio stations down. And the fact is we'll talk during the kind of the dark period of this discussion. The amount of revenue flowing into radio and television is not what it used to be. So with all the change I'm going to share with you, doing things the same way is not a growth strategy. So I really want to lay out for you the case that by changing some things you're doing and changing the way you're selling is really the road to growth. Before I completely dive in, let me just quickly talk about my company. So Jacobs Media has been providing consulting and research to radio stations for about 40 years. My background is sales. Started as a sales dude, moved up to sales management in Dallas, and then general management in Dallas, and then back here in Detroit as a GM. And then I joined our company quite a while ago and work with management and sales teams to identify sales strategies and new revenue. Our tech surveys, our new ones in the field right now, has allowed us to really understand what's happening out there digitally. We created a mobile app company, Jake Apps, that develops apps for media and has given us as consultants a real hands-on understanding of what's happening in mobile and digital and media. And then finally, we just got back from CES. Our whole brand is about forward leaning. And if you ever have the opportunity to go out to Consumer Electronics Show and really see what's going on and what's about to happen, it's pretty amazing. So let me tell you what I'm going to cover today, and then I'll dive right in. I'm going to start with the landscape. What's the media landscape out there? I'm going to deal with some real positives because I think the media business remains an outstanding business to be in. But I'm also going to talk about there on the right, the barren fields, the challenges that are out there, because I do think we got to be real about what's going on out there in order to truly take advantage of it. I'm going to share with you, as I did yesterday, a new approach to selling and a new approach to growth. Then I'm going to talk about revenue opportunities in the car. Again, I live in Detroit. We've been very involved with the auto industry and broadcasters and what the future holds for radio and television in the car. I'm going to spend a couple minutes talking about AI and where we see that helping sales. I'm going to share with you, as I did yesterday, some examples of how radio stations, primarily in small and medium markets, are applying a content strategy to generating revenue and building audience. And then finally, I'm going to outline for you what I think should be the sales playbook for now and going forward. So I mentioned let's start positive about media. The fact is the reach of radio and local television is unparalleled. I mean, yes, time spent listening and time spent viewing have gone down a tick, but the fact is if a advertiser wants to reach the market, the best way to go is with radio and television. Number two is local. In a world of Spotify and SiriusXM and CNN Plus and all these other things, we are the local mediums. And in many of your markets, the local newspaper has all but vaporized. That no longer is what it used to be. That used to be the primary competitor. Now, not so much. So our ability to understand the local marketplace, bond with local advertisers, provide local content and information is critical. I think traditional media, radio and television, have done a decent job providing digital options. But as you'll see in a few minutes, those options have been pretty much utilizing digital to just distribute our content. And we think you're leaving some opportunities on the table. Events, our ability to motivate people to come to an event, a concert, a food festival, a farmer's market, whatever. We can create events to drive audience to advertisers and sponsors. Public service and fundraising, from radiothons to small things, nobody does what we do for our local communities. Our ability to segment audience in the radio business, format by format. If you have an email database, our ability to do that is terrific. And then finally, the power of personalities. In local markets, people relate to our morning show host or our news host or whatever. And so the sum total of this came out about 2 weeks ago. This is Nielsen data that Marketing Charts published. And this is intended changes to utilizing media. And I know you all go into advertisers and they're like, well, nobody listens to radio anymore. Or, there's so many other options there for local TV. So this is a chart of, do they plan to increase usage, make no changes, or reduce? So right up there at the top, it's good old local radio. And as you can see, we are steady as a rock. I mean, I would take this chart and take it to every single advertiser because I think part of our sales plan has got to be marketing our industry. Local TV looks almost identical. And so this is a situation when you have huge audiences like radio and TV do, that's being static is great. And the fact is, over 8 in 10 and almost 9 in 10 people who listen to local radio plan to make no changes in the amount of consumption. So I got to tell you, when we look for good news for radio and TV, I look at charts like this and I just smile. It's kind of like we've always had it and we always will. But there's some negatives on the landscape. There's lack of real revenue growth, except in small markets, as I mentioned. I mean, every piece of data I look at shows radio revenue, TV revenue are like a leaky balloon. They're just kind of going down. And when I say revenue, I mean spot advertising revenue. The value of ratings have gone down. There's a lot of compression. The advertisers are in control. If you have a great book, they 4-book average you. I mean, it just isn't as good as it used to be. The political steroid, and this is in particular in television, but, political advertising every 2 or 4 years is terrific. But frankly, I think it's masking these other declines that I'm talking about. Shifting demographics, listening to radio and watching local television, the audience is aging. Our ability to attract young and even diverse audiences is challenged on our traditional streams, but there are other opportunities out there I'm going to share with you later. The competitive environment. As I said earlier, Spotify, SiriusXM, social media, all the pluses in the television side. There's never been more competition for media. The image of traditional media, as I said when I showed you that chart, this image that traditional media has seen better days. The audience is falling. My kids don't listen to the radio. How many times have you heard that? But the data out there show that we're in a lot better shape than that. I mentioned the aging audience also. So we've got some bumps out there. And to me, it's not having negatives that's bad. It's not embracing the negatives and fighting back against them that's what's required. So I think we're living at a time where the status quo doesn't work. I think it's a time of new thinking and new possibilities. And I don't think any industries are as well positioned as radio and television to do this. I think there is new thinking and possibilities in how we sell, in what we sell, and to who we sell to. One of the things that makes me crazy, and again, I deal in radio a lot, is I'll be with the sales staff talking about new digital revenue opportunities. They're like, well, they're not a radio advertiser. I'm like, this has nothing to do with radio. This is digital. And when you think about digital, let's look at where the money is. This is from BIA Kelsey, and this is projected for 2023 forecast. You look there on the left, traditional media revenue, 84 billion. Isn't that nice? Look at the right, digital revenue, 78 billion and growing. And if traditional media revenue isn't growing, we know the blue side of this chart is. So it makes no sense not to aggressively go after that. Let's look at radio and what the trends are. Come on. There you go. So this is U.S. radio station revenues from 2001 projected out to 2032. And as I said earlier, a slow, leaky balloon. If you look at the orange and then kind of the greenish bars, they're just steadily going down and going down and going down. And you look at digital and off-air, kind of the magenta purple colors, what are they projected to do? They're just projected to grow. So when I start off a sales meeting with a new station, the first question I ask is, how many of you want to make more money in 2024 than you did in 2023? Everybody raises their hands. And then I tick them off and I go, stop selling radio. And they freak out. And I'm like, no, you don't understand. Advertising spots on radio and TV are not growing, but digital is. So we've got to change our game. What about in TV? This is also from BIA, and you can see 22 is that political year. 2023, big fall off. But you look at that navy blue over the air, and you can see a pretty precipitous drop. So where is the revenue going? This is a projection from 2023 to 27. Local radio, basically flat with all of the growth coming from digital. Local television, not a whole lot of growth either. And you know there's a bunch of political in there. Where's the growth? Right there in digital. So let's talk about that and try to figure it out. And so again, I should, for the folks of you who were here yesterday, get a cup of coffee. It's going to be 5 minutes. You've heard this, but this is essential to this discussion. So about 7, 8 years ago, a friend of mine in Silicon Valley had an idea for a product for radio in the dashboard of cars. He didn't know anything about the radio business. So he said, can you bring together some CEOs? And I'd like to learn from them and share with them what I'm thinking. So we put together about a dozen. He came in, and the first question he asked is, what is the value of a listener? Crickets. Absolute dead silence. The CEOs had never thought of that question. And he was dumbfounded. He's like, in Silicon Valley, what we do is we build customers, and then we figure out every year how to get another 5 or 10% out of each one of them. Well, why aren't you doing that? And it was a real impactful moment for me because I realized that the way we're valuing our most important asset, our Q, is through the lens of Nielsen. And this is not to knock Nielsen. But the fact is that that is but one measure of how we can have value. But if all we're doing is driving Nielsen numbers, then our revenue growth is going to be limited to advertising that is based on Nielsen. So on the flight back from the meeting, pulled out a napkin on the plane. I'm pretty apt to do that. And I sketched this out. And this to me was the way radio or even TV are sold. That everything we do around that circle you see there is pretty much designed to drive people back to listen or view, because Nielsen is the only metric that matters. But if the dollars there aren't growing, we're utilizing all of these other things to drive people into a business that is basically flat to down. What if we were to take a different look? So I asked the stewardess for another napkin, and I designed this. I said, what if we looked at our stations not as a radio or TV station, but as a content platform? Because the thing that radio and TV do best is create content. And what if instead of driving people to just listen or view, we really leveraged our superpower, our ability to move audience around the platform, sign up for the email database, download a newsletter, attend an event. And within the platform, we create audience growth, profit-making elements. And that is the core philosophy of the thing. I just got my hands on this. This is the way NBC Universal. Now you're going, oh, well, that's NBC Universal. You can steal this and do your own stuff. This is the one-page sales kit that they are using, okay? And they're not just saying we have viewers. They're saying this is how many people we have across our platform. And so I want you to begin to think of a new definition of audience, that it's people listening and viewing. But what we want to do is build up other elements on the platform utilizing content to create new audience and new revenue opportunities. And the media organization that is absolutely the best at this is New York Times. Now, again, you're all sitting there going, well, we can't do what the New York Times can. Yes, you can. Won't be as big of a scale, but the philosophy and the application are totally the same. So we all know that the newspaper business is crumbling. And about a dozen years ago, even the New York Times was facing that. Subscriptions were declining. So if you look at the bottom bars, the dark bars, which is a quarter of their business, you can see that circulation has just been going down and going down and going down. Look at the dark gray bars. That's their advertising revenue. And look at how much that has shrunk. But the interesting part of this is that orange part that they call digital subscription. And that's the platform they've created. So the New York Times does a lot of research. They know their audience well, their readers. And one of the things they noted was that a lot of their readers are into food. And the New York Times had been publishing recipes for 110 years. He said, what if we were to create on our platform a subscription business around recipes? That business today generates $40 million a year. And I guarantee you, not everybody who subscribes to the recipes subscribes to the New York Times. So they've expanded their audience and they've unbelievably created new revenue. And again, at the end of this, I'm going to share with you examples that are being done in the radio business right now. Then they moved to a new part of the platform, puzzles. Then they bought Wordle and they created a whole subscription platform around that also generates $40 million a year. And then in the past year, they've created platforms and subscription around wellness, around family and child rearing, and believe it or not, media folks, audio. New York Times audio app is outstanding. I strongly suggest you download it. Were you aware that this newspaper, the New York Times, has the #1 daily subscription news podcast in the United States called The Daily. Yeah, we've let a newspaper come in and usurp that position. Why have they done this? They have done this because they view themselves not as a newspaper, but as a content-driven platform. So I constantly hear from broadcasters, well, we don't have the bandwidth, we've cut staff, who's going to produce this content? Well, if you can't do it, and you can't get it out of your staff, here's a few other suggestions for you to look at. Clients and advertorials. What type of clients? Well, if you're going to do health, it can come from hospitals. It can come from lawyers, legal advice, home improvement, education, from schools and universities. It can come from grocery stores. If you don't have your own recipes, I guarantee you, a lot of big grocery chains have chefs, and you can create a partnership there. You can create partnerships with local organizations like your local chamber of commerce, local government agencies, come on, faith-based groups, nonprofits, and believe it or not, even the audience. So the bandwidth issue should not be something that holds you back. If you see an opportunity in your market where there's a content hole not being filled, figure out either if you can do it, if you have somebody on staff who can do it, or with a partner. And by the way, if you partner with a hospital or a lawyer and you do advertorials, they'll pay for this. It'll be profitable outside of the box. So that's the philosophy. Now I want to talk to you a little bit about the car. You know, I mentioned we go to CES and I'm from Detroit, so cars have always been a big, important part of our life. When we went to CES in the, 2012, 2013, it became very clear to us that the whole dashboard array was changing. You know, radio used to own the center stack, and that was it. You might have a cassette or an 8-track or something like that, but we owned it. Well, the whole car is changing. I mean, you look at this automobile, and radio and television should be paying attention to how video screens have changed and how accessing radio has changed. So I want to share with you a couple of examples from DTS, which is Xperi, and Q, what they're providing to radio stations in the car. And I don't have a dog in this hunt, but I'm always looking, where can we make money from? And so I wanted to share these two examples with you. So Xperi are the HD radio people, but they've created a platform in cars called DTS AutoStage. And as part of DTS AutoStage, they provide stations who've signed up with them. And oh, by the way, it's free, with the ability to pull what they call heat maps. So all the cars are just big computers with modems. So they're sending out tons of data, including what radio station you're listening to and where you are. So a radio station can pull up at any time a heat map and see exactly where their audience is. So imagine if you were going to pitch McDonald's and you were to pull a heat map and then put a bunch of push pins in where all the McDonald's locations are or something like that. Now, all of a sudden, you have the ability to overlay where people are listening. And by the way, you can look at this by day part. So in morning drive for coffee, here's where they are. Nights for dinner, here's where they are. You can get daily listening. So almost like Nielsen ratings, you can see how people are listening to you in the car and which days are bigger and which days aren't. Hourly listening, what's happening from day part to day part. So that's what they're doing. And again, I am completely geeked by the heat map and the ability to have that graphic ability to lay out your audience, in a way for advertisers to really understand how close your audience is to them. By the way, I should have mentioned, I don't know if it was mentioned at the beginning, feel free to text in questions and we'll take them at the end. So that's DTS Auto Stage. Then there's this company called Q, and I'm pretty close to these folks. They have created the ability, you're probably very familiar with RDS. That's the two lines of words that you see there, which oftentimes have title and artist when music plays. You might also have the ability for album art. Well, Q has taken this one step further, and you do have to pay a fee for Q. So DTS Auto Stage free, Q profit making company. But the ability when an ad runs in a stop set to have the RDS become the cell line for the advertiser and the graphic of the client to pop up, to me feels like a really powerful addition. And so stations who sell this to clients upcharge them. So yeah, you're paying me $100 for the ad for 125. We'll put you in cars and you can look like this. And they've got multiple other applications you can see. But I just wanted to plant this in your head. They also have the ability, from a fundraising standpoint. It's just, a song coming up next. I mean, there's a lot of different things they can do. But we're pretty excited about this because the car is the number one listening location for radio, and our ability to create monetization from the car is important. By the way, I forgot to ask if you could optimize this for audio, because I'm going to play audio in a second. So when AI came out, and I'm going to do a very high level thing here with AI, the radio industry in particular went crazy because all the thinking was, we're just going to replace DJs. Isn't that terrible? And as we began to look at AI and the way it's being applied, my sales brain kicked in. And it's like, how can we use AI to sell better? How can we use AI to become more efficient and effective in our selling? So the first scenario I saw, come on, there we go, was in follow-up notes. So, you've all been on a sales call and you've had just a couple too many lattes, and the client is, going on and on about what they want to advertise and everything else. And you're pulling out napkins and sticky notes and scratch pads and all this stuff and writing down as many notes as you can. And you get back to your car and you're like, oh my goodness, what the heck just happened? Well, ChatGPT has an audio function where you can literally sit there while all the information is fresh and dictate it into your phone. And then you press start. And what happens is it completely organizes your notes. It can send a memo email to the client, proof it first. Hey, thanks for the meeting. We covered the following things. It can send a report to your sales manager. But most importantly, it will keep you from forgetting stuff. The next thing is with voice. How can we use AI voice to close more sales? So imagine if you had this loaded into your laptop and you're sitting with a client and the client's going, well, what's my ad going to sound like? And you've already gone through the copy points. You can quickly bang out an ad and then play a couple of different examples to get them excited. So I'm going to play this audio. I won't be able to hear it, but if it isn't coming through, let me know.
This Friday, September 29th, bring your bestie, your entire squad, or make it a date night with the one you love at Wine Knot at the Regency. You'll be treated to an evening of wine sampling, hors d'oeuvres, and dessert. Delight in dazzling jewelry, designer shoes, and more. It's an evening out for you to enjoy. Sponsored by LJ Plumbing and Heating. For more information, go to www.wineknot.info.
And if the client didn't like that?
This Friday, September 29th, bring your bestie, your entire squad, or make it a date night with the one you love at Wine Knot at the Regency. You'll be treated to an evening of wine sampling, hors d'oeuvres, and dessert. Delight in dazzling jewelry, designer shoes, and more. It's an evening out for you to enjoy. Sponsored by LJ Plumbing and Heating. For more information, go to www.wineknot.info.
And of course, AI can write commercial copy and everything else. The final thing I want to leave you with AI is lead gen. So when most salespeople go out to look for new business, they do it one at a time. They discover it because they're advertising somewhere else, or they drove by and saw a sign, or whatever. And frankly, it's fairly rudimentary and small. We've begun with our app business. We used to do this by selling apps to radio stations one at a time. We went out and we bought an email list of all 10,000 radio stations plus in the United States, put them into a database, and began an email marketing campaign with a variety of different content that was all then tested and measured utilizing AI. And we began to, frankly, score leads and learn at what point in the lead generation process was the client ready to be contacted. So I wasn't wasting my salesperson's time just randomly smiling and dialing, but we knew that when a client opened up the email X amount of times or shared it or did other things, all of a sudden our closing ratio went through the roof. So I know there's a lot of talk about AI in the business. Here's just a couple of things to think about in ways of using it. As I just talked about, lead qualification. Come on, moving slow. Campaign optimization. In other words, we'll send out 5 different emails, and then we'll begin to understand, utilizing AI, not only their effectiveness, but who's opening them. Are there specific categories? Are there specific titles of people who are clicking on it? Predictive lead scoring. So with this information, we then are able to predict when the leads are ripe. Chatbots. And I know this is, you're going to go in chatbots. Chatbots are driven by AI. They learn and anticipate the questions people ask. And we now use chatbots to be able to predict, again, based on the questions people ask, when they're ready to get a call from our salesperson. So we need to look at chatbots in a much more detailed way utilizing AI. AI is also amazing for personalization. I can send out 10,000 emails and every single one can be personalized based on what we've learned about them. And then finally, that predictive recommendation piece. So I don't think the radio industry should be scared of AI, and particularly the sales department. I think it can take a lot of the mundane work that many of us do and handle it for us and frankly make us more effective. So I'd like to close with some examples, going back to that platform model of what radio stations are doing around the country, utilizing a content-based platform model to grow audience and generate revenue, kind of like what the New York Times has done. So this first example on the left is one of my favorites. This is from a market you've probably never heard of. It's called Southwest Michigan. And you haven't heard of it because it's not a market, it's a space. No Nielsen, no local newspaper, no local television, but there is radio. And the guy who runs Midwest Family, Southwest Michigan, Dave Deutsch, is one of the smartest people I've ever met. And he recognized he was living in a news desert. And he has a news radio station. And he's like, what if we built a news service and filled that local hole? But where he really got brilliant was he didn't brand it to the radio station. It's called the Town Crier Wire. He built an independent news service that his salespeople sell, but it's totally separate. So you don't have to listen to the radio station in order to, relate to and enjoy this. And, their profit margin on this thing is absolutely huge. They're taking content from the radio station and repurposing it over to this. And it's a great success model. And frankly, it's being replicated. Saga in Clarksville, Katie Gambrill, Wheeless now, was the general manager who several years ago saw the exact same thing happening in Clarksville. There was no real local news, and they didn't even have a news station. But she said, there's a hole here we can fill. And so she built Clarksville Now And it is now a full-fledged, very profitable news service serving the local market. And it is so successful that last year, Saga promoted Katie out of her market manager position, and she's now traveling around the country building these programs in all the Saga markets and probably eventually beyond. So again, like the New York Times, you take different content and create new revenue models and new audience delivery models, and it's great. One of the big trends we're seeing with local media are what we call local market guides. And some of this is in mobile apps, and some of this is standalone mobile apps. On the left is Eau Claire, Wisconsin, around the 715. This is about events and things that are happening around the area. And it's sponsorable. And again, a standalone mobile app with great information. The middle one is from Rockford, Illinois, the Rock River Current, more like Town Crier Wire, a news service. And on the right is The Coast in Mendocino, California. What they do in their mobile app is they provide an advertiser listing. Every single advertiser on the station goes into the mobile app, and there's information about every advertiser, and then mapping. So you can open up and see where every advertiser is located, push on that name, and you can hit their phone number, their website, and directions on how to find them. So again, content driven. So last year, me and Darren actually were in Albuquerque speaking to the New Mexico Broadcasters Association. And in prep for the speech, I always research local radio and TV. Well, I was having trouble finding radio stations in Santa Fe, and this website kept coming up, santafe.com. And I'm like, that's not a radio station. So I clicked on it, and amazingly, they owned radio stations. But the other things they provided on this platform, things to do in Santa Fe, Santa Fe restaurants, Santa Fe shopping. They've built an entire city platform to move the audience over there, and radio is just a part of the platform. This is one I love. This is from a hip hop radio station in Madison, Wisconsin. During Black History Month last February, they decided in their mobile app to feature Black-owned businesses. And you can see, kind of like what Mendocino did, a full directory supporting their community and, of course, enhancing their relationships with the community. My bet is in each of your communities, whether it's Black-owned, Latino-owned, small business, women-owned business, I mean, you name it, you can create these kind of directories for the audience. And then targeted audience approaches. Every market has niches of audience types. In Wisconsin, there's more than a few farmers, and they decided to buy an AM station and utilizing a real star in the farm business, Pam Yankee, there at the bottom. They created a radio station called The Farm, and they have built out a full platform of information just targeted at farmers in Wisconsin. And if you've ever been involved in the ag business, ton of revenue there. The Madtown Mom Squad, content to moms who listen to this AC station. And to the rock station on the right, 94 dive bars and tiny taverns. So again, this is content that has nothing to do with listening to the radio, but enhances the radio station and its relationship. The final example I'll share with you before going to the sales plan, we work with a sports radio station in Denver, and we built them an app that is typical of sports radio apps. But then they came to us and said, high school sports in Colorado is huge, and we have a vision of creating a whole platform called Colorado Preps. And it is total coverage of high school sports across the state of Colorado. And if you look there at the top on the left and center, example, driven by Ford. The Ford dealers in Colorado sponsor the whole darn thing. So a brilliant idea. enhanced content. It worked great. So let me finish this with the sales playbook, about 7 things for you to think about, and then we'll turn it back over to our hosts who look like they're ready to start talking to me. Number 1, we got to market our industry. There's too much negativity and false assumptions about local radio and TV. And that one data slide I showed you, I think is a great example of how we need to be talking about and promoting it. Number 2, we need to be promoting and marketing our audience. We are too much in the 25-54 box. Baby boomers have value. Gen Y have value. We need to do more than just show ratings, but absolutely provide support and excitement and value about our audience. Number 3, digitize the audience. We need to start building up our email databases, our registration for things like newsletters, because the bigger those databases are, the more tools you'll have to sell. We've got to promote our personalities, which I think is just a untapped resource. We've got to always embrace that power of local. You know, as I lovingly say to an advertiser who is spending money on Facebook, you know, when you got a problem with Facebook at 4:00 on Friday, who do you call? When you got a problem with your copy at the radio station, they get back to you in 2 minutes. I think you need to embrace AI, and I just gave you a little taste there. But most importantly, we've got to expand our business beyond spots and ratings and advertising. We need to shift into content-based solutions, expand our ability to grow our revenue and grow our audience in new and innovative ways. And hopefully those examples provided you with something. Okay, gang, what do you got?
Hey, Paul, good stuff. I want to know we've got questions that's already into us, but here's the text line, Texas questions for Paul. Paul, we had a question that we addressed last night at the end of the day that came in that I want to throw at you based on your sales playbook. It said, is live and local dead? And I won't tell you how we answered it, but I'd love to hear you answer when a question comes in, is live and local dead?
Oh, that's the question?
That was the question. And yeah, that was the question. So it came in last night. So it wasn't per se specific to your session.
Right.
But when I hear you talk local and I hear you, and so what's your response when a broadcaster asks that question?
Are you kidding me?
That was our response last night.
Yeah. Live and local is our lifeblood. Live and local is what keeps us alive. Live and local is what separates us from these digital competitors who might have the ability to provide data and ROI. But is there any substitute to have a jock in Morning Drive talk about the great burger she had last night down the block? I'll stop there. I could go forever on that one.
You know, it's funny. I mean, there is so much talk out there today about influencer marketing, and that's the big buzzword for digital. But you also mentioned our morning shows. I mean, there's no stronger influencers, particularly in the news deserts out there, which most of us live in, than those folks. Nobody's more tapped in.
Yeah, well, that was a softball. You got a hard one?
Yeah, all right. Yeah. We got okay. So let's throw it. We got these coming in, so we're going to Brian here.
So okay, Paul, I gotta chime in here. We've got a lot of questions, a lot of chats, a lot of emails now. Hey, can you send me Paul's charts, right? And there's a request for every chart that you pretty much showed throughout your presentation. So here's what I want to do. I pulled your slide back up with your contact information, right? Yeah, rather than going all the way back through each of those slides, I apologize. Email Paul. Paul will get you those slides. So Paul at jacobsmedia.com, or obviously there's his phone number, there's his email address, but Paul at jacobsmedia.com. That way we don't have to go all the way back through those, because there's a lot of folks asking for a lot of charts, and I apologize, but that's the best way to do that. So, hey, I want to go ahead and queue up one question. We just had this one come in on chat, so we wrote it down, or Delta did. We've had clients give us AI spots that aren't effective. Is it wrong to suggest that we record and make it more effective, right? So, you know, folks are using AI, it's not doing well. Is it wrong to suggest, hey, we need to do this?
It's right to suggest. It's all about results. And there's nothing wrong with trying it. If you've listened to AI, like those two dopey spots I played for you, you can kind of tell that they're not humanly right. They're pretty good, but they're just examples. Don't let the client sit on their pride with AI. If you can make it better, it is on you to suggest that to the client. If the client decides to use a bad AI spot and it's not hurting your ratings or your sound, they really want to do it. But your job is not to just take the order. Your job is to take the order and give them the best advice you can give them.
Hey, this is a little bit more of the hardball than the other one I gave you. But last night, again, we had somebody that was asking specifically, and the question's going to sound pretty generic to begin with. How do we make money with podcasts? But let's make this more in tune with, can you give us some examples of folks who have just hit it out of the park with local podcasts?
It is really hard to make money with podcasts. I'm just telling you right now. You're better off making money with time-shifted content, like, bits from the morning show or whatever. Creating a great podcast, and a great podcast has to be defined by 5,000 listens per episode, because at that point you can start getting into the programmatic ad space. But imagine how hard it is to write, produce, record, promote, and get 5,000 downloads per episode to begin to make money. So I have to tell you, for the past 2 years, we have steered a lot of our clients away from doing podcasts and we work a ton in public radio, and nobody does better podcasts than NPR and a bunch of local public radio stations. I mean, Speed, you got KCUR in Kansas City, a phenomenal digital public radio station. But I know public radio stations that have spent $200,000 producing podcasts and lost 100. Oh, and they won a Peabody.
Exactly. Yeah.
But as I said to that client, you can't eat a Peabody.
Yeah, but lost $100,000. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. I'm getting the wrap here. We're getting up against it. We got Dan Spears coming up to introduce a BMI artist. And Paul, listen, I know I'll be seeing you soon. I just don't know where it is yet. So.
Yeah, I guarantee you at a broadcaster association near you. And again, if you have any questions that you submitted and weren't answered, email me. I'll get back to you. Hey, perfect. Thanks for the opportunity.
This was Paul, great.
Thank you
so
man.
much.
Appreciate you. See you soon.
Have
buddy.
a wonderful year.
All right. See you, man.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.